Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. All right, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Deepen. I am pastor of the village, and across from me is Andy Littleton, pastor of Mission Church.
Hello.
And we just did a Do Animals Go to Heaven? We even got a little theological about it all.
A little theological, and then we did a little memory lane down at the end. Some of our animal stories. Yeah.
And so enjoy. I think the whole podcast is good. We do, we have a few things that we're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying, to figure those out. This is a low budget podcast. So,
as in zero
budget. So
yeah.
When we get around to getting people interviewed and doing all those kind of things, we will.
Yep. It'll happen. So anyway, but thanks for joining us. We've been doing this for quite a while, and we really appreciate all of you who tune in.
Yeah.
And thank you, Brian at Mission, for telling me you listen. That was I needed that. Needed one of those. So thanks for that.
Yeah, Brian.
Enjoy the podcast.
All right. It's good to see you, Andy.
Yeah, good to see you. Good morning. So,
gosh.
Faith Over Breakfast. I haven't had any food nor coffee. Wait, no, I did have a little coffee.
Did you have a little coffee? That's good.
But I'm gonna eat after this. So
I
don't know how that's gonna affect my mood.
Faith before breakfast.
Faith before breakfast, because I decided to shower a little longer and enjoy myself this morning, which I still don't. I don't regret that.
That's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah. So we said last week, I have a habit of forgetting. I forgot last night, but then we got another email that reminded me of our topic.
Yeah, I did not forget.
So you did not. You also didn't. Thanks for communicating, Eric. But we do need to have a podcast just all about our own podcast etiquette with each other and our disagreements there, and we can just have an angsty conversation.
Sure, and then we'll both feel really guilty about posting,
and then we won't post it.
Right.
Anyway. Do dogs go to heaven?
Did you text me?
Yes.
Okay, so yesterday. So here's the problem. Monday is my day off, so I don't look at my phone at all, and I actually turn notifications off.
That's a great call. I think most people on their day off look at their phone all day, so that's what confused me. No, I just shot you a little. Remind me of our topic text.
Oh yeah. Okay, gotcha. Oh, you could listen to the podcast and then find out.
Yeah, that takes a while.
It takes a while. Just scroll to the end.
Yeah. Anyway, but we know what it is.
Do animals go to heaven?
We said dogs, though, didn't we?
Oh, dogs. Okay.
But the conversation has been expanded in a follow-up email.
So we have two people asking about this. I think one is from more parental.
Yeah.
Little kids.
The dog.
What do you tell them and that kind of thing?
Sorry, remind me. Has a dog died in their home, or the dog is old?
I think the dog is old.
I think the dog is old. Yeah. And then a good friend of yours brought up that there's some other questions. Hold on.
Let's just read this out, because this is we're going deep here.
If you're going to discuss whether dogs go to heaven on the podcast, I have two corollary questions. Do the cows, pigs, and chickens that are bred, tortured, and killed to feed our addictions go to heaven? Do wild animals such as the insects we spray insecticide to kill, or the orcas who are slowly starving because we dammed the rivers where the salmon run, go to heaven? And this is from your friend David.
Yes. The answer, real simply, is if the grasshopper is born again, then yes.
You shall enter the kingdom.
End of podcast.
Yeah. So, okay, interesting. So I think I threw this out last week where I said, believe it or not, in my experience of working in a probably more secular, liberal thinking space, one of the top questions that has sort of crossed into the spiritual world, where people are starting to ask and think about the spiritual world, has been around this idea, especially of dogs, but of animals, being with us in eternity somehow. And that has surprised me. I thought of all the big questions you'd think, questions around the existence of God.
Does God exist?
Honestly, I have heard that less than I've heard questions about, and honest questions about whether or not animals will be there, that surprises me. But it's a big question. I think I'm just saying, as we're engaging with people who are thinking about spiritual things, this is a true question that folks have.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to trivialize it. I really don't. And I think I have to throw out there and just say, I love our dogs. I'm super into our dogs. So I will be a very sad guy when any of our dogs die. And my wife will be devastated. So that's where I'm coming from. Do you have animals?
So I have a long history with animals, both pre and during marriage, I guess. Before marriage. So
what are you saying about your marriage right now? I'm trying to understand this.
As kids, I've had a lot of animals.
Okay.
Animals don't seem to live very long around us.
So if they go to heaven, more have gone to heaven because they've been in the Seepen home.
We've even had what we called the hedgy hospice, where we, create this little comfortable space for our hedgehog to go off and die.
Yeah.
And we built it all around one of an abandoned squirrel hole in our backyard. And, the hedgehog stayed there for a while.
And hopefully it wasn't a snake hole.
It wasn't.
Yeah, because that would have been messed up.
Or just a good dinner for the snake. Anyway, no, and then it had cancer, and there wasn't anything we could do, and so it wandered into the hole and died somewhere under the carport.
Yeah, such things occur.
No, my wife ends up being allergic to most of our animals, so we have to give them away.
Okay.
And I grew up with cats and a few dogs, and everyone's allergic to cats in my house. So there's no cats.
Yeah, we don't have cats. I thought I was allergic to cats, and the allergy tests say that is false.
Huh. So it's just in your head.
But I am highly allergic to dust, which no pet helps with, but I think especially maybe cats.
Cats, yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess they bring a lot of dust in.
Yeah, just that
all over their fur.
Thick fur.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's just put it on the table. Andy, do you believe that your animals, all animals, will be in heaven? Or are there specific animals? What do you think about these things?
Here's how there are a lot of questions here. Heaven.
Right. So we've got to describe
what does that mean? And so here would be my bare answer to the question, and then we can get into there. I do not believe specific animals or potentially any animals are in heaven. But I do believe that there is a new heavens and new earth promised in the scriptures. And this is kind of a merging of the ideas of heaven and earth. And I believe that will be filled with all the creatures that God has made, but perhaps not the specific one you had. There's a difference between the human soul made in the image of God and the specific animal, though I don't think we have clarity on that or how that works. So I'm not stating this as a foundational doctrine of any kind, but that's my basic position, I suppose. How about you?
Well, I guess first let's just start out by saying that if you want to think this through at all, we don't normally do this, but I'm going to put it out there. You should start by reading Isaiah 65, which is one of the most beautiful descriptions of the new heavens and the new earth. Yeah. And you have to start with that passage if you're going to talk about if animals go to heaven. So I'm going to let people think about reading that. You can also read Isaiah 11 and Romans 8. These are things you can think about. My answer is, let's first talk about, so heaven comes to earth. Like the dwelling place of God and the dwelling place of man is going to be the same.
They become a merged reality.
Merged reality. Yeah. So we know that in that reality, like you said, are going to be animals.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, though sometimes things like statements like the lion will lay down with the lamb, or Jesus is coming on a horse, you see in Revelation,
there's symbolism in there.
There's symbolism, so they may indicate that they're animals, or those are just.
It's not. That's why I'm saying it's not
right.
a proof.
But we know that God is creating new things, and He will create a new heavens and earth, and that will include animals. And it seems in Isaiah 65 to indicate that.
Well, and there are probably other indicators, such as in creation, animal life is predates us.
Yes.
And I mean that bears out scientifically as well. But in the creation account, the animal life was part of what was made for us to participate with and enjoy. So you would assume that since God intends the world to be made again the way it was supposed to be, that would include animals.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I have to think about is, let's just talk about what happens to you when you die.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you were buried, and when you're buried, you disintegrate into your bones,
mm-hmm.
right? And then after an extended period of time, there's not really any kind of indication that you exist, right? Or maybe you were burned up in a fire, or maybe you were cremated. So when you are resurrected as a follower
mm-hmm.
of Jesus, your identity
mm-hmm. holds
tight.
Mm-hmm.
The cells that you were made with, one, leave you every 7 years and are
mm-hmm.
shared by everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The crazy thing is you could possibly share the cells of Genghis Khan. Right?
Yeah.
So whatever substance that God uses to rebuild you, we will recognize you, but it is not the cells that you
right.
hold now in the tent that Paul calls, this temporary tent. But your soul, your identity, the image that you bear of God, that exists.
And that in that period is what we would describe as being in heaven.
Yes, or paradise, or however you want to describe those things.
And this is in Christianity, and to some degree some other faiths. But especially in Christianity, there is you have died, and then there is what you could call the recreation, restoration of all things, and there's a resurrection, and there is eternal life, but there's a period in between. So
I'm going to say, if you go to Romans 8 and it talks about groaning, right? The whole earth is groaning. I believe that we see that groaning play itself out in our dogs and our cats. We see it play out in the lions eating the lamb. We see it played out and they feel the curse because they die, and we
see it in plant life that die. We see it in honestly, I would say, in the homes we build that begin to fall apart.
Yes. So there is this weight, and our whole world is groaning. I believe that animals in general, and I do think there may be some different kind of value system that God has built into animals. That it's very possible that both new creation and the old being made new, you will find, Fluffy in heaven. Fluffy may recognize you. And Fluffy may not recognize you because Fluffy is not there. The chickens that are slaughtered for you to eat, probably not going to be there.
Well,
might be. There may be some chickens.
Yes. This is, and that's an interesting piece of the conversation, because there are animals that are early on and then later on in Scripture designated as sources of food, and things of that nature that seem to have. There is personality, but there is a difference between the level of sort of personality within these creatures and how God might deal with that. I do not know, but it's interesting.
When it comes to how we handle the gifts that God's given us, from the tulips to the chickens, the church is the kingdom of God, and it functions within different spaces. And in those different spaces, it actually doesn't have a universal calling to how it's going to proclaim that kingdom. And so I think if you're living in poverty and you're a church of poverty and you're wrestling to survive, probably God is not giving you the voice to say, hey, let's proactively figure out how we're going to deal with our food supply, right?
Right. It might be okay to go to Walmart
and get what you need,
and just get what you need off that 99-cent rack.
And so I think as the kingdom of God has wealth and voice and influence, then it has to begin to think about those things and how it deals with the earth groaning. But again, whatever you do is symbolic, and that you and I cannot create the new heavens and new earth.
Right.
We can only begin to steward it and say, this is what the new heavens and the new earth will look like, and we're building towards that together.
It's a method of proclamation in a sense.
Yes.
Of living by the new heavens and new earth way.
Right.
As we await it.
So I think we have a problem, and the problem is with our little kids, we want to tell them when our dog dies, well, when you go to heaven, that's where your dog is, right?
Right.
And we think that that's how we actually teach them to deal with grief and loss and reality. The thing is that the dog, the cat, the bunny, the hedgehog are these beautiful gifts that God has given you, your kids. And those are gifts in the present that you treasure.
Yeah.
And that when they die, you thank God for them. You remember them, but you don't need to talk about where they are. Because where they are is not your responsibility nor your children's responsibility. That's God's responsibility, who is good. And we can trust that whatever he's going to do with, Buster is really good and rich. And if
though we don't have insight into exactly what that is. Yeah.
And so it's better to teach our kids to remember and to tell the stories of Buster than to tell where Buster is.
Yeah.
And to help redirect those. The other thing I would say is that when you and I enter into the kingdom of God and God restores all things, though you will probably have died and be resurrected, unless God comes back before that, I will recognize you.
Right.
But the substance which made you
will not be the same.
Will not be the same.
And Paul works that out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to understand that even that your dog, the substance that makes the dog is not going to be the dog up in heaven, right? And so I think we trust God in how he's going to resurrect and recreate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of, I think, similar struggles that, around, especially around spouses, things of that nature, and death. There's in Scripture, it's not you won't be married or given in marriage in eternity, but yet there remain all of these questions of, will I know them? Will I live with them? Or just blatantly this assumption, I will be with you again there. And again, we don't. This eternal state is obviously too much for us to grasp. It is beyond our comprehension to some degree, and it will be all centered around who God is, and our longings will be utterly met in who God is. So the fear we have that this loneliness, I will need this person, or I will need my dog, or whatever, is. We don't understand how fulfilled we will be in the presence of our Creator,
right?
And how that factors into all of this. And so I see, and I'm not saying I get that either. I don't understand, but that manifests itself in some of our hopes being anchored in the particular, animal, person, even object. I mean, there are people who are just hoping that they get to live in their house or have their vehicle. I mean, there really are these things that we are that give us meaning and hope, and we're attached to, and we hope we can have them forever. And the thing that we're promised that we have forever is our Creator,
right?
But within a world, and I don't know how that works.
I mean, we don't fully know how it works, and I would say that even the whole passage that Jesus talks about, you won't be given in marriage, and he's not even actually talking about the new heaven and new earth in that spot, because in Isaiah 65 there's an indication that there will be birth in the new kingdom, and so what that all looks like,
but potentially even like things like conflict and stuff, which is there's a lot in there,
so I think we have to be very careful because.
And work and stewardship.
Yeah, there's the garden wasn't like a place of bliss. It was a place of labor. It was a place of learning. It was a place of coming to new understanding, relation. All these things are being built. It's just being built in a different way, a way that's not oppressed by sin.
And an interesting thing is the garden wasn't the whole world. The garden was a space in the world that they were sent out of.
Yes.
And so the garden was really maybe more like going to the temple.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. But yeah, yes.
Right. I mean, it literally
it was a place
Eden can be translated loosely as is a nursery in a sense. So.
Yeah. Yep. And then in the scriptures, especially in the book of Revelation, we don't go back to a garden. A city descends, which is very, very interesting, and that means, for one, that within the city are all things that humanity made, which is interesting. That God brings down a version of. I mean, we created streets and doors and windows and pillars, and so the city that descends from the heavens is made up of the things that we built.
Yeah.
And that's really incredible. But it's not our version of it.
Right.
Still, it's a very, there's so much in there. And I was listening to a writer's podcast the other day. Hadn't thought of this one, but it was interesting. Even in the Lord's Supper, he doesn't say, he doesn't go, you know what I'm taking you back to is I'm going to feed you grain and grapes.
No.
It's wine and bread, which is what we create. So we remember him through the work of our own hands.
No.
And so there is something to our work. And so when you see things like, Jesus in the parable about stewardship and those who are faithful with a few things, so I will make ruler over many things. And there seems to be ideas that, there's even responsibility and things of that nature. And again, not quite sure how it all ties together, but it also means that we don't fly off to an ethereal state. It's a lot of the things that we're investing in our life now are things that we would experience in that state, just not tainted and fallen and broken.
Right. And I think when you're talking about it, I think, okay, so one of the other things we don't realize is that as the Israelites read the Old Testament, in particular in those 300 years before Jesus, they are expecting not Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
They're expecting another construct.
Yeah. And so are we
exactly
in the same boat.
And I think we have to be really humble in saying, okay, the resurrected life is not the life you think it is.
No, it's not. Yeah.
And so
it's better.
It's
better.
It's going to be better than you think it is, but it's also going to be different. And I think we have to be ready to just be okay with that and live in the present. And I think a lot of times we want to live in the future. We want to know exactly how the end's going to happen. And I think God has never said, I'm going to let you know how the end's going to happen. He says, for good reason, I will show you that I'm in control. And here's some beautiful pictures of what it's going to look like, but they're not going to be the pictures. I'm not going to lay it out for you because then,
then you're not trusting God. You're
you
there's
learn that with kids.
Yeah.
I mean, we are children.
Yeah.
And God is treating us like children. I learned with my own children. I don't lay everything out for them.
Right.
I tell them a future.
Yeah.
I narrate a beautiful thing that has metaphor in it in order for them in the present to grow and to learn. And so I think that's very much what God's doing.
Well, that idea brings back an interesting, coming back to the question. And actually, just to throw this in, I think we should be open to, just as with Jesus, how when he came, he wasn't what some people wanted. It was better, but it came in a way that people didn't want, and it didn't meet some of the specific desires that people had. We should probably expect that as well. If there's a thing we really, really want, it may not be what's truly going to enrich our souls, and God may actually do it in a way that we wouldn't have picked. And the whole thing about God being God is that would be better, and there's a submission in that. Anyway, so that's interesting. But the original question had to do with talking to kids about an older dog. Mm-hmm. Here, you're talking about how you talk to your kids and narrate a future, but you don't necessarily give them all the details. With kids, I think this is a question about kids and death and kids and grief, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's what it really is. It's the dog matters. It's a wonderful dog. I have engaged with this dog. Question askers live on my street, and we will cry when our dogs die. We will miss their cool dogs, but it has to do with you're going to lose something you love, and there's grief, and so that's the bigger question behind this. I think it's just how do we. Is making this promise that this dog will be there, is that the helpful thing to get your kid through, or what would be the helpful thing as we talk about how you don't tell your kids everything?
Yeah, well, if my child were to say, "Oh, is such and such an animal? Are they going to be in heaven when I get there?" Right. I actually might say, "Well, this is what's going to happen in the end. That God's kingdom is going to come and be here on earth together, and God's going to recreate everything. So it's going to be different than a heaven." I want to get them away from that thinking. The other thing I would probably just say is, I don't know, but what do you miss about Rufus? Like, what do you miss about our dog, and what are some of the fun memories you have? And just redirect children to thinking about what they've lost and the sadness of that,
and actually encouraging the grieving process,
and encourage it to, because grief is remembering and being thankful for what you lost, like what you had. Yeah, because it was a gift. I think sometimes we forget that. Even my argument about the chickens being tortured and all those kinds of different, and humanity will always be rough on creation until God makes everything new.
Right.
I think what we're invited into is to be thankful for the offering that's given us, right? And certainly we can invite our world to treat itself better than it does and call people to something better, but at the same time we have to be thankful for what is. And I think we are not always that way. We consume without appreciating what the gift that's been given, the life that was given up by the chicken, the tulip that is not going to last once which, and this is not to promote all the spirituality here, but something that I think like the Native American population actually did well in an interesting way was they recognized that an animal gave up its life for us to eat. So it's not that they didn't eat, but they recognized something of there's a death had to take place for me to live. There is something true in what they saw in that we often just gobble down and consume. Don't ever acknowledge all of the dying that has to happen for us to live. Sure.
Which is true of plant life. Even you can't get away from it. You can't stop eating animals and not have things die to make you live.
Yeah. So I mean, you think like overconsumption. Think about Jesus' miracle about filling the nets full of tilapia, basically. Yeah. What were they doing? I mean, that's a lot more fish than they expected to catch. Right. And what are they going to do with all that? And God invites us to live in what we're doing and what's happening around us, and He is concerned first with where people are and what they're struggling with and how they can step into a relationship with Him, and hopefully then that transforms the way they treat the world and the earth. Yeah,
and I would say that our creational calling is to steward that as well as it's a deep responsibility. I actually think that in our liberal conservative divide, in which supposedly liberals are the ones who care about the earth and the conservatives don't, which doesn't bear out to be exactly the case, but I don't think that's helpful. I think of all people, just by the stinking name conservative, you should conserve things. But my point is, the calling of God's people is to love what He's made and care for what He's made. Yes. And absolute, because He made it and said that it was good, He pronounced a blessing over it. So we should treat it as such. And then on top of that, care deeply about the human, the soul, the salvation, that would take precedent, but it wouldn't be because we didn't care. It would be above and beyond. It would be another layer of our care and concern would be leveled toward other humans. And I've found it's easier to love the earth and animals than people. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I mean, I can look at the tree in my yard and it's struggling right now. There's a little dead section, it has never said a mean thing to me.
No,
it has never abandoned me. It's just there every day. And it's a strange, but it's so true. It's easier to love those things.
I think it's easier to love those things as long as they aren't stuck in a place where they are going to either limit or hinder your consumption.
Yeah.
Right. So if I really love the chickens and I decide I'm not going to eat chicken anymore,
right?
Or I love the cow and I'm not going to eat, or I'm going to only eat this particular kind. Loving them gets really complicated. Loving my neighbor becomes more complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying on a local. It's easier to love the goat in your backyard than it is to love your next door neighbor, maybe.
Yeah, it very much can be. Now, by love, what do we mean? But I'm just saying it's
affection.
Yeah,
to nurture and affection.
Right. Yeah. The goat, I give it a handful of stuff. It nuzzles up. I do have a goat.
I know, that's what I was saying.
Nuzzles up to your hand for a second. Yeah, it's that simple. I take a handful of grain across the street to my neighbor. They don't care. No. I'm just kidding. They look at me weird.
Right. They don't nuzzle you at all.
But obviously, the depth of affection you can have with a fellow human, the reason we're so let down by our fellow humans is because of the possibilities. If the possibilities are far higher. The goat is almost like it forgets me every day. The dog doesn't forget me, but also when I share my deep feelings, Benji, my dog, just looks at me and goes and licks me. Yeah. Okay, very nice, but
not really
not quite the same.
Step into your life and really offer you a deep insight or point you towards Jesus in the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I shared was that I've done a memorial service for a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that happened.
I've anointed and prayed over animals.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. I remember you said it. So yeah, there are probably some believers out there who would go, "You're crazy," and yeah.
Yeah, just did the same. Anointed the dogs with oil and prayed over them and listened to the people talk about how much they love their animal and. And affirm that God loves them and the dog, and that He's in control of this process.
Yeah,
and that's where we're all at.
Yeah,
I think because the world's hard, animals, particularly domesticated animals, are they're a gift from God to help us live in a hard world.
Yeah.
I just remember recently somebody told me a story about how they lost a horse and then they buried the horse, and the horse's buddy the next day just went out and usually does his little trot and does his thing, just went over to where the grave was, didn't actually know the grave was there. He knew that that's where he was, and laid down on top of it for a day.
Our goat, we had one of the goats died, and the other was young when it had come into our home, so our backyard. And when the older one who had arthritis, we'd put her down. The younger one laid right on her grave, and she was buried deep. I made a mistake. I buried one shallow, and it looked like it was coming up from the dead. It expanded. It was terrifying. Oh, honestly, the ground was opening. It was like. So we learned our lesson, buried him deep, and but Squeaky, the younger goat, just laid on top of that for honestly for months, if not a year, would go and just lay on that spot. And there's something there.
There's a connection.
There's a connection. Yeah,
right. And so I think it's a beautiful picture of God's amazing creativity, and that He interconnects us. He interconnects the animals. That their neurobiological existence is interconnected with us and them, and it changes our brain, changes their brains. It's pretty powerful and pretty beautiful.
No, it is. It is absolutely, and it's not a farce. And there's a reason that people connect and can. I mean, My Octopus Teacher. What an interesting film, but that's an amazing. Example of this octopus that begins to actually trust. You can see, move toward a human, And I think that those are opportunities to see. I think we see God in that. I think we see in the connectivity of creatures. Like, if this is all just stuff growing up for meaningless reasons, that connection, A, is just, it doesn't mean anything in the end, and B, it's extremely shocking. But if there's a God that created all this, it's actually, you could see that, oh, this actually makes some sense, and maybe this is real. This isn't just, all fake. This is real. But when I did the memorial service, I took it to mean they wanted to remember the animal. And these were friends of ours who actually are, the faith is not, it's a struggle for them. It's more of a back and forth. And when they asked if I would do this, I wanted to do it for them. I know that they loved their dog very much. And so there were a couple of things I told them I couldn't say. I didn't feel comfortable to say this specific dog will be specifically in heaven. I don't know how well that works. I kind of, similar to what we expressed earlier, I said I can't state that and anchor your hope in that, but I can state that God has a good purpose, that these animals are amazing creatures of His, that they are speaking to us about the goodness of God, and that there is a new heaven, a new earth, and that these losses are kind of like you said, like groanings that point us there, that show us that life is valuable and beautiful. So shared a couple things along those lines. People told stories about the dog, and actually I have no regrets. Yeah, I actually think it was a powerful opportunity to point people to a God that does good and beautiful things, and an opportunity to mourn.
Yeah, I would agree.
You were saying.
Yeah, I think as you were talking, I just think animals, because their life is short, especially the domesticated ones. They're all short, but the domesticated ones teach us how to grieve. They teach us how to have joy. They teach us they do help instruct us in the way of God, and we also get to see, in a sense, the curse played out in front of us. Yeah. We watch in a faster speed. We watch them be joyous, and then we watch them get older, and we watch them
get sick,
or we watch them impacted by how people treat them. So if they're abused, and they have trauma, and they're skittish, and they are mean, or they respond, and we begin to see how environments create people and animal, like, can create a personality and a way a person is, and it's important for us to see that and to read.
And that's one of the most powerful connections I have with my favorite of our three dogs. Is he was deeply abused. He was afraid of everybody, tried to bite everybody. My brother-in-law found him on the street in the middle of a monsoon storm, and he was just aggressive. And he still got a little edge to him every once in a while, but he's just like the sweetest now, and you can see, like, we've taken care of him. He's changed. And so actually this morning he was like curled up. He just curls up next to me in bed every night. And it's just like, and I roll over and he grunts, and I'm like, sorry, dude, but he's just a sweet little creature, but he was so broken, and like, just, had this terrible life. So there's something really cool about getting to see just a little bit of transformation, even in a creature. Yeah. And like you said, having a chance to provide a better environment, it's actually powerful. And you go, humans actually have more capability to receive this. Yeah. That it can point you to, like, we can change. If this dog can change, we can change.
Right. I think you get to see in a little faster speed the power of love a lot of times.
Okay, I've got a question for the two of us. Let's first do, what's your most painful animal loss memory, and then what's your favorite animal memory?
Well, I think probably the most painful loss is I had a cat that we were given, or we went and got at the Humane Society when I was 5. His name was Nosy. Lived 18 years, so he lived until I was in my 20s. Yeah. That cat played tag, thought it was a dog, it moved with us, and maybe when it was 16, we finally gave it away, and then it was so old, I think it walked out in the street and got run over, and I got a phone call saying, the cat's dead, and I think that was, it just shared so much life. I mean, 15 years of an animal is a long time in your life, especially when you're a kid, and kind of grow up with it.
When I was very little, 2 cats, actually. The first one was killed and eaten by my dog, and I found its head.
Ugh.
The second one, we were getting close to moving, and we weren't going to get to take it with us, but it ran into the street and got run over by a car in front of me.
Oh, wow.
These are both before I was 5.
Oh, geez. So you have some traumatic cat memories.
Yeah. Which, so those, that duo... Anyway.
Well, no, that's good. I have just since we're doing animal things, I have a couple interesting animal stories. So we had this orange tabby cat called Putty Paws. And also, I think animals sort of take the personality of the family. So the cat was needy and loud. And so he, every morning, started with, used to do it to me, but then moved to my brother. He would get on his chest and knead it to death and yell because he wanted to eat. Same when he wanted out. Well, one day he disappears. And he was gone for a year. Then this lady comes, and we knew her in the neighborhood as the cat lady. She comes to our door a year later, and she knocks on the door, and she's like, "Hey, like I found this cat yesterday. Is it yours?" And I was like, "No, that's not my cat." And then I just had, I think, a Holy Spirit moment. I said, "But you wouldn't happen to have a pretty big orange tabby that yells a lot?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've had that cat for a year."
Whoa.
She returned the cat to us. He was so mad at us. He knew who we were, and he was mad. And so he was louder than... So that cat. So then we got another white cat to be his partner named Skittles. And...
You named a white cat Skittles.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Skittles and Putty Paws were great friends. But every time a third cat would wander in and we would adopt, it would die. And it would usually die by being run over in the street in the back because we lived right on 5th and Columbus. And we had this idea that there is a conspiracy between Skittles and Putty Paws that when the third cat came, they would just, kind of get him to go to the street and be like, "Hey, go get that, go run across the street." Or they'd push the poor cat into the street because so we decided 2 cats were all we were allowed to have.
That was all you're allowed to
so that's, cats were a big deal in my family. The dogs, we got them, but we didn't like them that much. We had a Sheltie. Sheltie would just run around the pool and try to herd the people in the pool until his feet were bloody and he'd bark all the time. And they really don't get Shelties.
Interesting. We have, so we have our youngest, our newest dog, which belongs to my daughter, Leo. He was reported to be, when he was very little, and we bought him from a sort of sketchy apartment complex in Phoenix. He was reported to be part Chihuahua and poodle. He's not poodle. There's no poodle in this dog. As he grew up, it became very obvious. So he's probably some form of like a spaniel.
Okay.
Spaniel Chihuahua.
Well, that's an interesting mix for a dog.
He's a hoot. So he herds the goat, which is hilarious to watch. He points and he's like, "Yep, yep, yep," and like we'll get the dog or the goat up on its little brick pile and get it stuck there. So that's very fun to watch. I enjoy that immensely. And then he's funny because standing up to laying down, it takes 0.004 seconds or something. He'll be running and then he's just laying down, just boom, like immediately. There's no process of laying down. He just is. Just goes from like a sprint to boom, lay down. So he's funny. Chandler, our other dog, there's a story I wish I could tell on here, but I can't, of him. I can't tell it. Just going to have to wish you knew.
Off-air
story. Off-air. Yeah, some people have heard this story. It does include the song Honky Tonk Badonkadonk.
Oh,
so
wow.
Just ask us about that one.
Oh, my goodness.
And he's Michaela's shadow. And then Benji, the one who I was saying and we named him after the movies because he was very much that kind of dog. But the thing I'm going to miss is the thing that drives me crazy with him. If he wakes up in the night and he needs to use the restroom or go outside, or the water hasn't been refilled, he just very kindly walks over and just gives me one little lick on my nose. And that's the signal. He's so polite. It's not like pawing at the door or whining. He just and I wake up enough and I'm like, no. And then if I don't listen to that, he'll put his little paw on my face.
Nice.
So he's just such a gentleman.
He believes he's in charge. He only needs a little.
Yeah, he's like, I don't have to make a big fuss.
He's a Jedi dog.
I'm just going to touch you, and you'll know.
Andy, it's time for you to get up and feed me.
Yeah.
And let me out.
So as much as that drives me crazy when he wakes me up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's kind of a sweet little thing where when it's gone, I'll be like, oh.
Yeah.
Dude.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
So got some animal stories. Well, to wrap things up, I would suggest if you want to just think about it from a biblical perspective, you should read Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 65 and Romans 8 to think through the groaning of creation. And then an enjoyable, thoughtful, maybe reading through Revelation to see all the animals present in Revelation, weird and normal.
Yeah.
I think, and then kind of begin to process that. But what's important is to understand that heaven isn't some place out there that we're all going to, but that heaven and earth are coming together and all things will be made new. And you have to think about all of that in the context of your animals and your life. And
lest anyone doubt us, we are very clear that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is what makes this possible.
Amen.
And that is extremely important for our souls as well. But it doesn't leave out anything in creation.
And a little interesting fact, the resurrected Jesus ate fish. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting fact.
That is an interesting fact.
And to close this, my grandma, who was like an animal wizard, would come home and she had fish and she would stick her hand in the tank. And she did this every day. And she got her fish to come up to her hand and she would pet them and they would lean into.
Whoa.
So even the most simplest of God's creation are drawn to the people who are called to steward them.
Yep.
And I think that's a really powerful thing.
It's worth considering.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
thanks, man. And if you have questions or clarifying questions, you can always email us, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. And we are still offering books off our shelf, I believe, if that's something that
I guess we have to send David Crawford one. He's a new questioner.
Yeah.
So a book to you, David. I'm very excited.
There you go. And we love to hear from you. If you like the podcast, or even just find it something tolerable to listen to, 5-star reviews are available for you to share with others so that we can be found and these little discussions can get out there.
Yeah. The more you rate us, the more people find us.
That's right. So thanks for hanging out with us for breakfast. I just wish you would have brought me some, but next time.
You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.